You know, for 100 years, we've all thought of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland as the great poem of post-war despair. But what if its desolate landscapes and all those fractured voices are haunted by a totally different catastrophe? A trauma that, unlike the war, we've almost completely forgotten. I mean, the poem is famously bleak, right? It's all broken pieces, opening with lines about cruelty, dead land, and memory. And with just one chilling line like this one, Eliot sets this tone of deep anxiety and decay that has hooked readers for a century. So, for the last century, pretty much everyone has agreed on this story here. We read the poem as a reaction to the trauma of World War I, a reflection of cultural collapse, a peek into Eliot's own personal struggles, and this really deep dive into myth and philosophy. And look, all of that is true, but it might not be the whole picture.
What if there's something else, something huge, that's been hiding in plain sight in this poem this whole time? A catastrophe that our culture, unlike the war, has basically chosen to forget?
Okay, so to even get into that, we have to talk about a really weird quirk in how we remember things as a society. We build monuments to war, but we tend to just erase pandemics. Why is that? Well, think about it. A war. That's a story, right? It's a collective fight against an enemy you can see. It creates narratives of heroism, of sacrifice. A pandemic is the total opposite. It's this lonely, internal battle you fight against an invisible enemy. There's no glory, just private tragedy and this overwhelming sense of helplessness that, frankly, we'd all rather just forget. And make no mistake, the Spanish flu of 1918 was an absolute monster. It infected a third of the world's population and killed something like 50 million people, way more than died in World War I. And yet, for 100 years, it's been like a historical ghost, a footnote. So the big question is, could this ghost of a pandemic actually be the secret heart of the wasteland? Well, to figure that out, we gotta play detective and look for clues in the life of the poet himself. And guess what? The clues are totally there. In his letters, Eliot writes directly about the pandemic. He even uses the language of sickness to describe his own difficult marriage, calling it a domestic influenza. So the virus wasn't just some abstract threat out there, it was inside his home and inside his house. And here he is describing what it was like to have it himself. This isn't some high-minded literary idea. This is real. It's the physical reality of what it feels like to have your body just completely give out. That feeling of total collapse is a key piece of our puzzle. And check out how specific he gets here. He's not just saying, oh, I was sick. He's describing these really particular visceral symptoms, extreme dryness, a bitter taste. Okay, file that away. That specific feeling, it's going to be really important in a minute. So let's just lay out the timeline here, because it fits perfectly. Eliot and his wife both get sick. The virus becomes this constant presence, both for real and as a metaphor in their lives. And all of this physical and mental strain leads directly to the nervous breakdown he had in 1921, which is right when he was finishing The Wasteland. Okay, so now, armed with all this, let's go back into the poem itself. Let's reread it through this new lens and see how the experience of being desperately ill might have actually shaped its strange and powerful language. You know, for ages, everyone's been kind of stumped by how chopped up and chaotic this poem is. But what if it's not chaos at all? What if it follows what the scholar Elizabeth Autka calls delirium logic? The crazy jumps, the switching voices. That's exactly what it feels like to be trapped inside a high fever, where reality just bends and your thoughts completely fracture. Take a line like this one from the poem, "Dead mountain mouth of carious teeth that cannot spit." Wow. I mean, it's such a powerful image of decay and just profound thirst. See, with our new lens, this isn't just a metaphor for spiritual emptiness. This is physical. It's the extreme dryness that Eliot himself wrote about. It's the feeling of a body just screaming for water. All right, here's one of the most famous parts of the whole poem. People usually read this as this really deep spiritual cry, pulling from Buddhist philosophy. But what if there's something much more immediate, much more physical going on? Through the pandemic lens, this becomes the raw, unfiltered experience of a body being consumed by fever. It is the internal monologue of someone whose own skin feels like it's literally on fire. There's this other feeling that's just all over the wasteland. The word for it is innervation. It's this profound exhaustion, this feeling of being drained of all life force. physically, mentally, morally. And while that perfectly describes how people felt after the war, it also happens to be a precise medical term for what happens to your body after a really severe illness. And honestly, once you have this idea in your head, you start seeing it absolutely everywhere. The whole poem is soaked in this pathogenic atmosphere. The fog and the wind feel like they're carrying an invisible threat. The constant tolling of bells sounds like the bells that ring endlessly for the pandemic's dead. The poem is literally overflowing with corpses and bones. So, okay, what's the big deal? Why does this even matter? Well, because reading the poem this way turns it into something brand new, a memorial to a catastrophe that history tried to sweep under the rug. All of a sudden, the poem's famous brokenness, it starts to look different. It's not just the cultural shrapnel of a world shattered by war, it's also the internal shattering that a virus can cause, the way a high fever can splinter your thoughts, your memories, even your sense of self. So, in a way, Eliot created the very thing history failed to, a memorial. He captured the quiet, private, hard-to-describe suffering of the pandemic, the fever dreams, the bone-deep exhaustion, the fear. He made an artistic record of a trauma that the world was trying to forget the second it was over. This quote from the scholar Elizabeth Alka, man, it just nails it. Every broken voice in the poem speaks to how personal and lonely it is to be sick. But when you hear them all together, that sheer number of voices, it captures the horrifying global scale of the whole disaster. And that just leaves us with one last question, doesn't it? The Wasteland shows us how art can become this accidental archive for trauma we've tried to forget. Which makes you wonder, 100 years from now, when people want to understand what we just went through, where are they going to look? Will they find it in official memorials, or will they have to go searching for the real story, hidden in the art we're making right now?